Welcome to the Thresholds of Reality, the podcast where we explore unexplained and mysterious events, phenomena, and legends. Today, I am joined by Dr. Rubin Naiman, a sleep and dream psychologist who's at the University of Arizona, really close to where we're at. And today, we're going to talk about the importance of dreams and sleep and see if we can get to the bottom of a lot of questions I've had for a long time. So, for right now, just strap in as we examine the edges of the unknown. Dr. Naiman, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today about your work and some of these kind of concepts that have been on kind of our collective consciousness for a while and seem to be really resurfacing lately. I know that other podcasts, mainstream podcasts, have tackled the subject of sleep and what makes for a good sleep and why dreams are important really recently. But one of the things I wanted to start off with is why is it that whenever my wife has dreams about nasty things that I've done, I'm responsible, but she never does the nasty things I dream about?
I'm curious. You asked her that question, and is she here to defend herself?
It's her birthday today, so hopefully she's watching. We'll see. But
yeah. You know, one of the features of a dream is that when we dream, we believe we're awake. And whether we remember the dream or not, it impacts us. It affects us. It affects our bodies, our brains, our minds, our souls, our spirit. It affects us in the same way waking does. Many of us have had, in fact, most of our waking experiences we don't remember over time. They fade. We remember the pivotal ones. So when we wake up from a dream, it's happened. It's real. I mean, we dismiss that. We are taught, and we teach our children when they're very young, particularly with the bad dream, we say, forget it. It was just a dream. And it's not really a wise thing to say. Because
what should we say?
Let's talk about it. So in terms of thresholds of reality, in my work, sleeping and dreaming are thresholds to another reality. And one of the huge reasons that we don't sleep well, and we don't as a culture, and it has profoundly negative implications, is that we're afraid of that other reality. We look at sleeping, we look at dreaming through waking world eyes. It's something I call wake-centric, or many of us are familiar with the Matrix. Yeah. There's something I call the wake-trix. We are living in a matrix. We're living in a bubble. You and I and everybody else, we think that this waking consciousness we have right now, this is it. This is life. People who believe in life after death think they're going to kind of get killed or knocked out or die, peacefully in a bed, and they're going to wake up the way they do in the morning, and they're going to have this kind of mindset. They give you back your name tag, and here you are in heaven or someplace else. But we think waking is the gold standard for consciousness. Okay, and then we see other kinds of consciousness. Particularly sleeping and dreaming and other kinds as well. We see them as being secondary and even subservient. For example, all sleep research really asks the same question of sleep. Whether we're looking at elements of sleep in the brain or behavior, it says, hey, sleep, how can you make us better people? How can you make us better waking people? The presumption is the only reason we sleep, and similarly, the only reason we dream is to make us better in waking life. And there's no doubt at all that it does, but it's also another life. It's also another kind of consciousness. We can also learn to live in, to be in, to experience. We can actually experience, be aware of sleeping and dreaming. So that takes us over that threshold into these other worlds. Getting back to your wife, I don't know.
That was more, it's kind of a lighthearted question to start things off. But one of the things that kind of has plagued me is that over the course of my life, I have had dreams where my motility in the dream is impeded by something. I think a lot of people have had a dream where they're being pursued.
Yeah.
And in that pursuit, they're trying to flee and their legs are kind of stuck
Mhm.
or cemented to the ground. Why is it that we can't run away from a pursuer in our dream?
Yeah. It's a good question for waking sometimes too. In terms of the dream, when we dream at a physical level, the brain sends a message to the body, specifically to our voluntary muscles, the muscles we move with and speak with and so on, use our legs and arms. Um, those muscles are literally paralyzed when we dream. It's called REM atonia. REM is rapid eye movement sleep dreaming. Atonia, without tone. There's a loss of muscle. Sometimes people will actually wake up before that switch is thrown. I don't know if this ever happened to you. I've had this. And you wake up and you're paralyzed, and it can be really frightening.
Oh, the sleep paralysis demon, right?
Yeah. That same paralysis is present in every dream, particularly if we're having a nightmare, a bad dream, we're being chased, we're being pursued. If we are so intent on getting out of there, we actually start to push psychologically, we're pushing against that paralysis and we feel it. And so our legs don't work and we're boggy and our arms don't work and we can't scream.
Okay. Um, in kind of a similar vein, have you ever had dreams about flight where you yourself are able to fly just in kind of your bodily sense? Um,
Sure.
over my lifetime, when I first started dreaming about flying, it was very much like swimming, like a doggy paddle, right? Just very
Mhm.
slow, kind of just getting the hang of it. And then it has evolved over time to where now it's very much like Superman, where it's just like a point and I go.
Mhm.
What's going on there? Why am I now so expert at superhuman flight in my dreams versus
Well,
early on?
Sam, these are interesting questions, but there we need to ask a question preceding them to really open the door to reasonable answers.
Okay.
You're asking about what we call dream content. Okay, in a
Hmm.
dream, I get boggy, I can't move when I'm being chased, or in a dream, I'm flying and my flying is improving. That happens in the dream, right? We're talking about dream content, and there's a million examples of this. But the question that we need to address at first is what is dreaming? This happens when I'm dreaming, but what is
Yeah,
dreaming?
let's get to the root of it.
Yeah.
Let's start at the beginning. What is
Let me
dreaming?
ask you, what is dreaming?
Yeah, so for me, the way that I've always understood a dream, it's this sort of storytelling or a replay of events that may have happened or will happen or may never happen. My brain has and recalls that sometimes it doesn't recall it during sleep, during the night.
Hmm.
I've had dreams during the day too, taking a nap or something, but it's generally at nighttime. I don't always have them.
Well, you don't
Um,
always remember them. You're probably, if you're sleeping normally, you're having dreams, 4 or 5 dreams every night. Most of them
okay.
are forgotten. Um, so dreaming is an expanse, an expanded consciousness. In fact, dreaming is just like waking, except there's one big difference. In waking, and what we're doing now, our consciousness, you have this experience of Samness, right? And I have
Yeah, yeah,
Rubin.
yeah.
It's me. That consciousness, who I am right now, is channeled through this body. My experiences are channeled through my senses. What I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, maybe smelling, tasting, touching, and my motor output, the way I'm moving. I tend to move when I speak. So my consciousness is it's in the medium of a physical body right now. And we call that waking.
Hmm.
In dreaming, my consciousness leaves the body. Okay, so it's that same consciousness, but it's no longer contained or constrained or framed or limited by sensory input. When I'm asleep and dreaming, my eyes are closed. I stop hearing. I stop feeling touch with dramatic diminishment in pain sensation. So conscious, I mean, this is an age-old sacred notion, the belief that
Yeah.
the soul leaves the body. And there's evidence for that in the brain. I mean, literally, it's hard to define soul. But what happens is in REM sleep and dreaming, there's a disconnection between prefrontal, what we consider executive function in the brain, okay, and lower function, which operates the body. From the perspective of the body, dreaming is an out-of-body experience. Okay, so because in this body, I mean, the only way I'm able to fly when I'm awake is by getting on an airplane. I don't know.
Right.
I can fly at night because I leave my body. You know, so dreaming is an out-of-body experience. Dreaming is consciousness that is no longer contained or constrained or channeled through the waking body. It's the same consciousness. It's the same you and the same me, but it's operating outside of the body.
So the normal physics or the normal limitations that we might experience physically don't apply.
Right.
And
Why?
so I'm just trying to like flex my imaginative muscles over time. I'm starting to figure
Well,
out
I
what
don't know if it's
what
just
kind of constraints I have.
yeah, I'm not sure if it's just imaginative, you know.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, wouldn't you fly in your body if you could? I mean, you mentioned
Absolutely.
Superman. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's something we want. It's not, I mean, it's not that you're just imagining it. It's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and the other thing that happens, it's interesting in REM sleep is when the mind is away from the body does some interesting things. It's like right now we're in our body, and whatever the body, if the body is hungry or the body wants to go pee, we can say, "Hang on, bud," we can. We're in charge. The mind is in charge. When the mind leaves in REM sleep, in rapid eye movement, dream sleep, interesting things happen. One thing is it's called an autonomic storm, an autonomic nervous system storm. So in the body, things get really irregular: respiration, heart rate, core body temperature. The body just kind of almost, it doesn't literally, but energetically, it almost shakes out waking. Okay? Um, the other thing is, independently of what you dream about, it can be a nightmare, it can be anything. Men get erections when the mind leaves the body gets an erection, the penis gets erect, and women lubricate. When the executive is away, the body goes whoopee, and
Let's do what we want to do. Yeah.
it does what bodies do. That's how bodies connect, right? So it's a really interesting time when the body is free of the mind, and there are some really positive health consequences of this. You know, Psychologically, we've known for literally 50 years or more that if we don't dream well, we dramatically increase the risk for clinical depression. Okay? That's a whole other important area.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So Kyle's my normal co-host, not here today, but he wants to know, when you sleepwalk, are you in REM sleep, and that is why you do not wake them up?
Actually, sleepwalking does not happen in REM sleep because, as we said, when we're in REM sleep, we lose muscle tone. We can't move. So sleepwalking and sleep talking pretty much happens outside of REM sleep. There can be some spillover movement and talk, but most sleepwalking generally happens in deep sleep.
Okay. So sleepwalking is a separate phenomenon.
It is. And I should say, and this is going to complicate matters, we dream all the time. There's been evidence that goes back, again, 50 years, showing that there are dream-like experiences, there's dream-like mentation that actually occurs during deep sleep. If the REM sleep dream was really vivid and visible, which it is, imagine the REM sleep dream is like a thick, bright cumulus cloud against the blue Arizona sky, which we're familiar with.
Sure.
Then there's another kind of dream that's more like a cirrus cloud. It's a wispy, barely seen kind of dream. So that goes on through the night. And there's a continuous kind of content or storyline, even outside of REM sleep. So there's dreaming through the night. And I believe, and I would say that there's also dreaming that goes on in the background during waking. There's evidence for that. There's an oscillation of brain hemispheres and different things. It's subtle. It's sort of behind the curtain of waking. But I want to emphasize, in different ways, we dream all the time.
Okay. I mean, dream state, I've heard it described as kind of like a flow state where thoughts just kind of without any restraint just flow and connect. And so a lot of times, as you're describing a dream to somebody, it often will sound absurd or non sequitur. And I have experienced times where I kind of will feel the thoughts flow, very easily. Is that kind of a similar state as what you're describing, kind of being in a dream
Well,
state?
I think, yes, I think there's a kind of consciousness behind ordinary thinking. And let me just add here, I was saying earlier that we live in a wake tricks. We're addicted to waking, and it's one of the main reasons we can't sleep. The way most of us do waking is through thinking. We think all the time. We think and think and think. Now, I think there's dreaming behind that, but the thinking is more linguistic, it's more rational. The major function of thinking is problem solving. We think when we have a problem, large or small. We think out possibilities. Let's see, how do I get from here to there? I might go, no, that's going to work. There's a roadblock over there. So thinking solves problems. But in our world, most of us have thinking turned on all the time. You might remember Abe Maslow, who said, if all you have is a hammer, you treat everything like a nail. For those of us, for the millions of us who think all the time, we treat everything like a problem. For many, 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 I'm going to guess for most people, life itself becomes a problem to be solved because we're looking at it through thinking eyes. Dreaming is behind that. Dreaming is really different because dreaming is an experience. Dreaming is characterized largely by curiosity. You're in a dream and you meet this great big green monster. Even if something is chasing you, you're curious about it. You get a
Sure,
picture.
you look over your shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah. We take it in. So that kind of curiosity is less and less present when we're driven by problem-solving cognition, when we're driven by thinking. This is one of the big differences between how we do waking and what dreaming does. Dreaming is creative. Dreaming is present moment.
Okay. So it's kind of a almost simultaneous, maybe instantaneous observation, process, and response.
Well,
I
let
think
me
happening all at once.
let me throw something else into the mix to get at that comment. Um, there's widespread agreement in both academic circles around the world, in departments of psychology, neurology, neurosciences, and sacred traditions, religions, spiritual traditions. There's widespread agreement that there are three primary kinds of consciousness. Not a surprise. There's waking, dreaming, and sleeping.
Okay.
And many of us know, we've taken yoga classes, we know the chant Om, right?
Mhm.
Om. And actually, we write it OM, but the correct way to transcribe that is AUM. It's made of three sounds. And this comes out of Hindu tradition 5,000 more years ago. Three sounds are Ah, U, And those sounds are actually words that have meaning. Ah means waking. U means dreaming. Means sleep. And the notion is that a whole, an enlightened, and integrated, a complete consciousness includes a blend of waking, dreaming, and sleeping. Aum is being awake and dreaming and sleeping simultaneously.
What does that even look like?
I'm glad you asked. We actually, all of us pass through a few seconds of this. We all have there's a momentary experience when we wake up in the morning where there's a bit of sleep there, There's some dreaming there and there's some waking there. We call it grogginess.
Mm.
The reason I laugh is the word groggy comes from the English rum drink grog.
Grog. Yeah.
And the implication is we wake up drunk, right?
Right.
Get some coffee, man, take a shower. Uh, but grogginess is a fantastic, exquisite hybrid, I would say, spiritual state of consciousness. It's so interesting to linger there. One of the things we do when we linger there is we recognize the images still floating around from the last dream we had. So we're not closing the door. We're not jumping out of bed when the alarm goes off. We're letting that dreamy consciousness come with us. And we can actually carry sleep consciousness too. And sleep fundamentally is a state of inner peace. So we can bring into how we do waking, we can bring these other features, these features of dreamy, creative, curious consciousness, presence, and deep serenity and inner peace. The more we practice being groggy and not, just not leaving that in bed, bringing that with us.
But the difficult part for me with that particular exercise is that the minute I acknowledge or recognize the state that I'm in, it vanishes. So by recognizing that I'm in this kind of interconnected or in between interstitial mind state,
Mm-hmm.
my cognitive abilities take over, and I am now fully aware, fully awake.
How do they take over? What do they want?
Well, they start to itemize or identify the agenda items I have for the day. What's on my calendar, and it's okay.
So like all the rest of us, you're wake centric. As soon as waking shows up, you go, yeah, you get on that boat.
Guilty, 100% guilty. Yeah.
Waking is wonderful. It's just not the whole show, So there's not an argument against waking. It's about complementing it, bringing dreamy qualities and sleepy qualities along with it.
Okay. Well, okay. So I am one of these types of people where most nights I hit the bed and I'm on my phone a lot and
I'm gonna have to report you. You know that.
I've noticed the trend and it's become, I wouldn't say it's a huge problem for me, but there among my friends, I will get messages from them throughout the night that I have to address in the morning. I put my phone down probably around 10:30, 11.
You still call them friends?
They send me funny videos, that's what friends do. But
yeah, because they're awake too, right?
So there's this kind of almost like self-punishment where people refuse to go to sleep because they are afraid of what's going to happen the next day. It's that idea that I've got so much I got to deal with. I really just want to stay in this state of mindless scrolling on my phone as long as possible.
Well, so what you're referring to is lives that are devoted to survival. Even though, nowadays we're not running around, hunting for food, protecting ourselves from wild mammoths. Many of us still lead lives that are devoted to survival. We're afraid. It's driven by fear.
Sure.
As a part of that, we again, as a culture, we dream and sleep really poorly. Really poorly. And there's some serious consequences, physical health and mental health. And one of the reasons we do that, and maybe one of the reasons we avoid sleep at night, is I'm firmly convinced as a culture, we are afraid of the unconscious. We're afraid of the unconscious. I think there are a number of different reasons. One of them is religious, and one of them is pseudoscientific. So let's take Freud, who's fallen in and out of favor. Freud believed that the deepest part of us, he wrote in German, he called it das Es, which is German for it. And it translated into the id. He talked about the superego, the ego, the id. And the id is this vast repository of just horribly repugnant impulses, terrible things we wanted to do to our mothers, our fathers. I mean, the presumption is we were animalistic in the worst sense of the word, and you could not trust the id. In classical psychoanalysis, you basically had to dominate with the ego. You had to divert that energy. So Freud believed what was deepest inside. He didn't use the word evil, but he might as well have. Also, in Western religious traditions and Judeo-Christian traditions, there was a belief that children were born with demonic influence. There is Christian child-rearing textbooks that go back hundreds of years that talk about, this is where the term comes from, beating the devil out of. They encourage parents to beat the devil out of children. That was the term. We still use the term today. Again, the presumption is there's a devil inside, that we're not born innocent. And there are lots of variations on that. I think we still carry that. Nowadays, some of it is neutral. Nowadays, we've sort of reduced who we are to a brain. A lot of my patients come in and say, my amygdala made me do it. It's like, but and maybe neutral is a step away from demonic, but I do think we really don't trust what's deep inside. And so our dreams sometimes produce nightmares. And is that a reflection of the deepest part of us? What do they mean? Certainly God knows there are nightmares in waking life. As we speak, we know there are terrible things happening here and there. We're afraid of the deepest parts of who we are.
I mean, yeah, I can definitely see where that kind of undercurrent of, we were talking before about ancestry and we've inherited the survival instincts of our ancestors, and that's mostly a good thing, but sometimes it probably comes with some baggage, and there's trauma or kind of what do they call epigenetic markers from ancient history about things that we need to survive or avoid to survive, instincts that probably crop up a lot in those dreams. And some of them might be really violent, I'm sure. One of the things that I find really fascinating, though, and Sticks Boy in the chat has brought it up. He says that he's talking about deja vu, and this notion that you can dream something that will happen, or you have an experience where the dream and a real life event or a waking event, they kind of mirror each other, either exactly or enough that it triggers the sense of deja vu. Do you have any insight into why that is?
It's connected with what we call precognitive dreaming. So I've been speaking about dreaming for many years, mostly in North America, but also in Europe and some other continents. And I always ask the audiences, how many of you have had a precognitive dream? How many of you had a dream that at some point in the future, it came true? And at least 50% of the hands go up. It's a lot. It's a lot. Those are people who remember distinct experiences that connected with a dream. So we'll get a little wild here. I worked with a dream teacher for some years who's gone now. He was shamanic-like man with a profound goodness and connectedness with that other world. But he taught us that, he said nothing ever happens in the waking world before it happens in the dream. So here's a metaphor. When we look up at the night sky, we might look at a galaxy or stars that are 100 light years away. Okay, we know that when we see it tonight, it's already gone. It was there. We're seeing what was there 100 years ago. We can think of life that way. That life is actually happening. Real life is happening in another sphere. We might say a spiritual sphere, and it takes time for it to descend, like starlight, and come down. By the time it shows up here, it's already happened. So it's not that dreaming is precognitive, waking is postcognitive. All of this has already happened, and it's just coming into our awareness now. And that explains deja vu.
Okay. So that's a very kind of almost, mystical or spiritual interpretation. My dad, my dad's a very religious guy, and he says in a very similar vein, things have to be created spiritually before they're created physically.
Yeah.
Um, kind of along those same lines. Um, is there a connection? I mean, culturally, there historically there are connections between spirituality and dreaming. Are those types of things still manifesting themselves today? Do we still is dreaming still a spiritual exercise?
I would say, yeah. So there's a wonderful book called Big Dreams by one of my colleagues named Kelly Bull Kelly, the former president of the the International Association for the Study of Dreams. And in that book, Big Dreams, he traces the origins of all major sacred and religious traditions on earth to dreaming. It's quite profound. There are many, many examples of dreaming in the Bible. One I've written and spoke about is the story of Jacob's ladder, which
Ah,
is,
yes.
and in my world, it's a spiritual explanation of dreaming, connection between heaven and earth. Dreaming is referred to as the language of God. So we can look at dreams in two ways. Most of us believe that dreaming is a mirror of waking life, and to some degree it is. In dreams, we process waking life. Some years ago, I was in another house looking out my second story window from my desk, and I saw a guy on a bicycle go by, and he got hit by a car. He was
Oh,
fine. He tumbled. It turned out he got up and walked away. But and this is not unusual. 2, 3 nights later, I dreamt about something really similar. Somebody getting hit by a car. What happens is the brain, if you will, the mind will replay and digest difficult to digest experiences. So, to understand what dreaming does psychologically, we compare it to the gut. Many of us know now that the digestive system has been referred to as a second brain. Years ago, there were discoveries that all of the neurotransmitters that mediate the brain, epinephrine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, dopamine, on and on, we found them in the gut. And it turns out that the gut has to make very intelligent decisions. It's a screening mechanism, right? Because we send all kinds of stuff down there, you know.
yeah, that's true.
Okay, we're going to keep this. We're going to literally excrete that. So the gut decides what will become a part of us, our energy system, our physicality, what will become us, and what we will let go of. If the gut is a second brain in digestion, the brain is a second gut during REM sleep. What I mean by that is all of the experiences we consume during the day actually get digested. Now, when you drink a glass of water, it doesn't really have to be digested. When I look up at the sky or see a tree, that goes down easily, right? If I see somebody get hit by a bike, that has to be broken down, digested. And by digestion and assimilation, the experience then becomes a part of us. It gets stashed in memory in places of similar experiences. It enhances us. So in one respect, dreaming is a source of psychological nourishment. This is really important. I said earlier, if we don't dream or don't dream well, it's connected with depression. I think that depression is a kind of dream indigestion, a kind of dream constipation. Where we're not really deriving nourishment from waking life experiences. They're not being digested in the dream. Now, there's another kind of dream that if you'll pardon the expression, is almost like dream diarrhea. When people are exposed to serious trauma, they're post-traumatic nightmares. And these are dreams that are trying to digest really difficult to digest horrific images, really difficult ones. People getting blown up on the war front and so on. So dreaming is a healing process when it breaks this down and digests it. And that's one of the critical functions. When we don't dream well, we actually begin to lose our capacity to remember, to learn, because important stuff is processed in the dream. So having said that, that is dreaming that mirrors waking life. And we're all familiar with the phrase, into the looking glass. That's an interesting notion. So the dream is a mirror. We might think of that mirror as being on a door. It's a mirror, and it's a portal, it's a gateway. We can actually go from dreaming as a reflection of my individual experiences through the door into collective dreaming, and dreaming as a reflection of not I, but we, when we go into the collective. Let me
Okay.
give you a quick example. Yesterday, I was going through some paperwork on my computer, and I found an article written about me in Time magazine, and in a special Time magazine issue called The Dream Therapist. And I hadn't seen it. I guess it was like 2017. It was interesting. I pulled it up, and I just totally forgot about it. When I closed that window, an email came in from a woman I don't know, who said she had just read that article and she really wanted to talk to me. The timing was impeccable. I mean, it was within a minute or two. And in my world, that's collective dreaming. There's nothing magical about it. There's nothing special. It happens a lot. We often don't see it, but there's a kind of a coalescence of experiences that it looks like, well, we call it synchronicity. So that happens a lot if we open to the dream, if we recognize, if we're willing to keep our hearts open to mystery. And that's not about approaching the mystery like it's a problem to be solved. So there's a bunch of people who live this way. They're really interesting. They're called children.
I have a
Kids.
few of those.
You do. Kids live in this world. It's like, one of my teachers used to say, as adults, we are here to teach children how to live in the world, and children are here to teach us how to be spiritual. Because they live in the dream. They live with mystery, with curiosity, with presence. And we tend to lose that.
Yeah. One of the things that I keep coming up with in dreams is this notion of repeating the same dream over and over again. It's not necessarily a nightmare or something horrible, but it just keeps resurfacing. And it's not necessarily associated to trauma, though. In the particular instance I'm thinking of, it might have been traumatic. I'm talking about old jobs. Like that's
Mhm.
something that resurfaces all the time.
Mhm.
Is that along the same lines where you have these traumatic experiences or experiences where you basically were in a Groundhog Day type scenario, reliving the same routine over and over and over again?
Mhm.
And your mind is either trying to expunge it or what's going on? What's the process happening there?
It's almost like a cow chewing its cud, swallowing it, and then it comes back up, right?
Okay.
There's a great GIF of Homer Simpson, and in his life, he's had several encounters with sleep and dream issues, but this is one I love. It's all over the internet. He's sitting on his couch. He's got a blanket draped over him. He's got his TV going, and he's rocking back and forth, and he's chanting, "Can't sleep, gonna die. Can't sleep, gonna die." It's funny, but it's tragic too. It's a true story. So there's something about repetition. There's something about so first of all, let's talk about the fact that repetition happens in daily life. Many of us have been on the same bus. Have you had this argument with your wife before? Have you
Oh,
had
sure.
this problem with your kids before? Did this thing happen in traffic before? Yeah, I don't know if you notice. Anytime you're really in a hurry, driving somewhere, you'll get behind a school bus.
Yes.
It's a law of nature. So there are repeating issues in life, and it's interesting to take a look at them. I think the first thing we need to consider, and maybe this is obvious, but we need to consider that this is not punishment.
Okay.
You're not standing at the blackboard saying, writing, "I will not, dip so and so's pigtails in the ink." Thing. It's not like that. There's something about circularity that there's a wisdom in that. The best modern example is in a lot of airports, in Phoenix, for example, when we go into the parking garage, we go up a spiral, right? But it feels like you're just going around and round. So if it feels like you're just going round and round around the same issue, consider the possibility that there's a gradual ascension, that it's a spiral, and it's actually taking you somewhere. So not to judge it. And
Okay.
some experiences we go through over and over and over again. It's normal.
So it's kind of an iterative learning process where
Exactly. Exactly.
where maybe a little variation in the initial conditions can affect the outcome.
Right, right. So we want to stay open to it. We want to stay open to it. There's something about repetition that's beautiful. Speaking of children, I was thinking about Sesame Street, how often there, I remember years ago, this guy show up and he'd say, I'm going to paint a seven. My kids loved it. He'd paint a seven. They'd be back 2 minutes later painting a seven. And kids too, do it again, daddy, do it again. Uh,
Sure.
there's something about repetition that's really comforting. We do this in church, right? We repeat certain prayers. So I think we need to look at it as an okay experience and to learn from it, not to push past it.
Okay. So I will allow those types of things to happen. I mean, not that I have any control over it, and which brings up kind of another subject which um, we're really interested in, which is the idea of lucid dreaming or taking control of the dream state.
Mhm.
Is that a real thing? Can people really take
Oh,
control of the dream state?
absolutely. But there are two separate issues there. Lucid dreaming, lucidity refers to being aware that you're dreaming while you're dreaming. Taking control is a separate issue. It's really important. The Tibetan Buddhists have studied dreaming for thousands and thousands of years. They have a pretty arduous path that some of their monks go through. It's called sleep and dream yoga. And they're taught, they practice and they're taught, and we can do this too, to become aware of the dream when we're dreaming. But they're also admonished not to change the dream.
Oh, that's
Two
interesting.
separate things. And they're very, very important. So we like to control the shit out of everything. We do.
You got that right.
We just do. Whatever it is. I'm in charge here. Um, so when we look at dreaming as a resource, it can get out of hand. Now, I believe dreaming is sacred. I think it offers us reflections of our personal lives. It offers us permeability to spirituality. Uh, but we tend to look at it the way we look at resources. So in our world today, we clear cut forests. We dam up essential flows of rivers and streams. We strip mine, and we're familiar with in Arizona, important metals and elements. And I'm not arguing against using nature. I think it's there for that reason, but we use it without any regard to its role, its larger role.
Mhm.
Um, and so we need to not do that with dreaming. I think the dream is teaching us, and to try to control the dream is like you're sitting in a classroom, and there's a wise old teacher there, and you get up and you tell him what to teach, right? Um, one of my teachers, he said an amazing thing. He said there's only one thing we have to learn in life, and that's that we are not our own teachers. And the way many people practice lucid dreaming is like, yeah, I'm going to control this thing that's trying to teach me something. So
Yeah.
lucidity is great, and there are websites and books that can teach you how to be lucid. And let me put in a plug, by the way. I mentioned the International Association for the Study of Dreams, IASD. This is a wonderful organization of very diverse people. We have neuroscientists from some of the best universities in the world. We have shamans coming up from Peru. We have everything in between. And there's a common interest in dreaming. So we have annual conferences. Often they rotate between Europe and the States. This coming June, I think, they're in Ashland, Oregon. And if people are interested in dreaming, it's a wonderful place to show up and make connections.
Well, very good. Um, so we'll get to some of the books that you've authored in a minute, but just to kind of put a button on the idea of controlling a dream space. Um, why I mean, is that dangerous? Is it just recreation? Are you depriving yourself of something essential by doing that?
Yeah, I think it's arrogant. Now, let me add a caveat. We sometimes are working with people who've been severely traumatized, and traumatic nightmares are actually different from, ordinary nightmares. Um, Ordinary nightmares tend to occur in the last part of the night, the last third of the night. Traumatic nightmares can happen as soon as a person falls asleep, and they're usually um, vividly repetitive of an extreme trauma, and it keeps the person from sleeping. And night after night after night, it increases the risk for suicide. And so there are times when we want to intervene and teach people to control the dream so that it's not exploding in their faces. And after that, we can use other approaches. So again, this doesn't apply to most people. So in most cases, I would say what we want to teach ourselves and each other is to be present for the dream, to really be present, to be open-hearted. And here's another piece. We know that when we have a nightmare, and by the way, the way we psychologically respond to a bad dream is exactly the same way we respond to bad waking, right? It's the same me. If I can practice another more effective, more peaceful approach in nightmares, that'll generalize to my day. So you can think of the dream as a place where you're practicing. And we often teach people over time that when something is chasing them, some giant green goat or a weird monster or an alien, when you're aware you're dreaming, when there's some lucidity, you know you're safe. So you can turn around and face whatever is after you and start a conversation. Like, hi there, who are you? What do you want? You have a question for me? Are you here to tell me something? And I'll tell you, this is really uncanny. Most of the time when you do that, the nightmare image transforms in a flash. The monster turns into a speaking giraffe or a goat or a rabbit or a friend or a teacher or Jesus. This really weird thing that happens when you face the fear. And it's called shadow work. The essence of this is that we find diamonds in coal. We find metaphorically, the most precious gem buried in a black, dirty, sooty underground place. So it's our willingness to mine. It's our willingness to approach even things that seem threatening, nasty, evil, and to open a dialogue, and it brings out the best in them.
Yeah, I've heard it put in a kind of a way. It's the thing that you want the most is in the place you least want to look.
Interesting. Yeah.
Fascinating.
A former
Um, go ahead.
Debbie Ford was a wonderful woman, a friend who passed away some years ago, wrote some beautiful books. Her first book was called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. And one of my teachers used to say, people who are too heavenly minded are of not much earthly good. I think it's great to be heavenly minded, but here we are on earth, right? So there's a question of not whitewashing everything. It's not black and white. It's not good and bad. Um, and I think dream work can help us see past some of what appears to be darkness and into the light.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right. I'm going to see if I can share your website here and put that up. All right. So this is your website, and you've written several books, and you've done several events, speaking events, and workshops. The latest book is Hush, a book of bedtime contemplations. Um, what's the idea or the thesis behind Hush?
I um, wanted to simplify some of the basic truths about sleep. And Hush has 100 paragraphs. They're bite-sized. I think of them as spiritual bedtime snacks, right? And I think they're expressions of truth. And when we read them, I think it's less about learning and more about reminding us of what we know in our hearts. For many of us, what we knew as children about sleep. So it's a reminder. It's a bedtime contemplations.
One of the workout apps that I've downloaded is called Center dot or Center is the name of the app, and there's a lot of sleep conversation going on in this fitness app, um, and kind of meditations about what you should do. There's a famous actor who will often do these kind of silly like lullabies almost, but um, is kind of your state of mind going into sleep as important as the sleep itself?
Absolutely. I said at the start today that most of us think of sleep as a subset of waking, because waking is the primary consciousness, but it's not. It's a separate kind of consciousness. And there's a question of how do you bridge? How do you get from waking to sleep? And there's just a simple answer to that, and it's what we've been talking about. Dreaming, dreamy consciousness, not sleepiness, but dreamy consciousness is a natural bridge between waking and sleep. Many of us get stuck. Uh, So if you Google sleep tips, you're going to come up literally with hundreds of thousands of sites and God knows how many tips. Sleep tips are about how to get near sleep. It's like if you have swimming tips that take you to the edge of the pool, but not into the water. We can't think ourselves to sleep. We can't. We need to think differently about sleep, but we need to not think to get to sleep. And when most of us encounter trouble falling asleep, the first thing we do is we start to think, which keeps us stuck in waking. And it really is, it's an act of surrender. It's an act of faith. Falling asleep, as I've written, is an act of faith. We have to trust something outside of the waking self. And, when people say or think, I can't sleep, it's always true because the part of me that I call I is the waking self, and that part can never sleep. A deeper part of me needs to leave the I and venture into more of a dreamy and then into a sleepy consciousness.
Is there a is there a problem with using sleep aids, chemical sleep aids, versus kind of a meditation or a meditative approach?
Well, it's a it's a tough question. I think generally speaking, we way overdo our dependence on sleep aids. Most of us, the vast majority of us who have trouble sleeping, don't have trouble sleeping because we're not sleepy enough. Beneath it all, most of us are plenty sleepy. It's because we're too awake. There is no such thing as a true sleeping pill. Sleeping pills basically knock us out. They don't replicate sleep. Now, in a pinch, in a crisis, social or medical crisis, there may be moments when it's most merciful to give somebody medication. But the amount of people that are dependent on medications, some of which have very serious long-term psychiatric and other side effects, not a good idea. Having said that, um, most of us, I believe most of us as we get older, or even when we're younger, we're deficient in melatonin. Melatonin is not a sleep aid, it's a natural neurotransmitter that mediates not just sleep, but mostly mediates dreaming. When melatonin levels are high, we dream more. Most of us have insufficient melatonin, so I'm an advocate of that. But let me emphasize, and this isn't very nice, but I'm going to say most of the melatonin on the market is worthless. It's not regulated. It's not pharmaceutical grade. It's not time released. Most people don't know how to use melatonin. So a lot of people have used it, but not in an informed way.
I mean, is there at least a placebo effect by taking a melatonin gummy from Walmart versus, you know,
Well, there might be, but there might also be some inadvertent effects. Melatonin regulates circadian rhythms, and the amount you take and when you take it and how long it's in your system, these are critical factors. Um, And by the way, alcohol, which is probably the most popular sleep aid in our country, it's astounding how much alcohol people take. I'm not a teetotaler, but I think we drink much too much alcohol. And cannabis, both alcohol and cannabis, they both, excuse me, they both interfere with REM sleep. And again, I'm not saying we should never use them. I think they're really appropriate times for using both, but they do, in the long term, with regular use or excessive use, they interfere with REM sleep.
Okay. Well, do you have any advice for people looking to improve their sleep? Maybe they're not insomniacs. Maybe they're like me, where some nights are good and some nights they're not great. Well, what advice would you give them?
I think fundamentally we need to consider that we have to let go of waking. And you were saying earlier, I think you were saying that when your head hits the pillow, you go out pretty quickly. No?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in our world, most people consider that being a sign of a good sleeper. I hope your wife is watching. It's not.
She she is so jealous that I can just kind of roll
I
over.
know. I hear this all the time from women. You know, their husbands conk out. So a lot more women have insomnia than men, and some of that is because they have these intense rhythmic cycles, more pronounced than men. But if you're falling asleep in less than 5 or 10 minutes, it's not a sign of being a good sleeper. If you sat down to lunch and you swallowed your entire lunch in 5 minutes, my Jewish mother would say, you know, this is a good eater. But you know what? It's probably somebody who is excessively hungry.
Yeah.
And if you fall asleep really fast, it's a sign that you're excessively sleepy, which suggests maybe you're not getting enough quality or quantity sleep before. So how do you get to sleep? The same way the planet gets to sleep. There's something historically we used to call dusk. You know, it's kind of gone nowadays. We call it rush hour.
Yeah.
But so we think of living things in two ways, right? There are diurnal beings, you know, like we're awake during the day and we sleep at night. There are nocturnal beings who are awake at night and sleeping. But there's a whole other class of living things most of us don't know about. They're called crepuscular.
Crepuscular. Okay.
Crepuscular. It's a beautiful notion, used more in Spanish and France, crepuscular. And crepuscular refers to beings like cats and rabbits and mosquitoes and lots of that become much more awake at twilight. They're awake at dusk and dawn. Really interesting times a day, fascinating times a day. And we've disconnected from that. Crepuscular consciousness takes us, it's a dreamy, like it's a waking dream consciousness. If we didn't turn the lights on, you think about when you're out camping somewhere, you're sitting up and it's getting dark, things get kind of weird. You start to see shadows bouncing around that are scary and remind you of Richard Nixon or something. We go into a waking dream, but that's crepuscular consciousness. Now, most of us are sitting around watching TV at night, and the lights are bright. So we want to dim the lights. We want to go down like the sun. You know, we don't want to crash, you know, when the lights go out. So dimming the lights, particularly dimming what we call blue light, the blue wavelength of light has a detrimental effect on melatonin. It enters the eye. So low blue lights, quiet lights, slowing down, getting into a dusky consciousness, which is a beautiful transition into sleep.
I love that. Okay. So basically it comes down to getting in touch with those kind of ancestral instinctive things that triggered sleep in ancient times before light bulbs and street lights took over nighttime.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Naiman, thank you so much. I've got your website up here on the caption below. Make sure that everybody is checking out Dr. Naiman's information, his books. Thank you so much for taking the time today. We really appreciate you.
My pleasure.
And explaining to us all about sleep and dreams. And for our audience, if you enjoy this content, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to bring more to you. One of the things that we just finished, Dr. Naiman, was studying near-death experiences, which is a kind of a sleep state, a very intensive sleep state. And one of the things about that was one of the guys talked about how in his near-death experience, he perceived somebody's backyard, and then he later visited the site and was able to identify the backyard matching what he perceived when he couldn't see. And kind of in the research that I did of your work, he talked about the eye that you see with when you're asleep.
Yeah, there's dream eyes and there's sleep
Yeah.
eyes. There's an interesting connection between sleeping and dying. Falling asleep is a kind of dying. In Greek mythology, Hypnos, the god of sleep, had a brother. His brother was Thanatos, the god of death. So,
Mm.
and in many traditions, there's this uneasy but essential kinship between sleeping and dying.
Yeah, and hopefully we, I would love to spend another hour going over that. But thank you so much for being on the show, and please check out Dr. Naiman's work. And until next time, keep on exploring the edges of the unknown.